Hello and welcome to the Father and Son Formula One podcast. I'm the father in the title. My name is Graham Miller, and here is my son Toby.
Hello.
And this episode is about the Grand Prix weekend in Hungary at the Hunaroring just outside Budapest.
Mm-hmm.
If you've seen it, an awful lot happened in the race. So I actually watched some of free practice. Was it Charles Leclerc who smashed it into the wall in free practice?
I don't remember. I wasn't really watching it. I don't remember why, but it was 16th in it was 18th in FP2 with only 8 laps completed. So I'm going to use my Sherlock-like reasoning and deduction skills.
And he came on the radio and said, "I think my left rear clipped the wall." And if you actually see a video of it, he properly lost it and went sideways into the wall.
Oh.
It was like a master of understatement. But I think we ought to kind of, in a bit, just kind of rattle through free practice and qualifying. Although, actually Q1 was almost unheard of.
Yes, Q1 was strange. The whole qualifying was actually quite exciting.
Yeah, I mean, they had a drying track, especially for Q1.
Yeah.
And nobody really seemed to know where the grip was. I think, Lewis Hamilton was one of the fastest people out there in Q1. I think he was the fastest with exactly the same time as Max Verstappen.
Yes.
Oh no, that's right. Ricciardo went to the top of the timing boards right at the end.
Yeah, by about 300ths.
Sergio Perez crashed.
Yes, he did.
And caused a red flag 2 minutes 13 from the end.
Mm-hmm.
Some drivers went out, some sat in their garage, but the track was being weird, and I don't think anybody improved in that 2 minutes 13.
No, they did actually. Because Perez was 10th, then he got pushed all the way out. It was actually I was surprised by how much the track gripped up. Even with the rain, sort of. During the red flag, there was actually a lot of pace was gained, which was odd.
I remember now. It was like in the pit lane, it was raining and you could see it running off the roofs. And then they panned round and the track was bone dry.
Yeah, well, it was very hot, I think.
Yeah, it's like over 30-degree track temperature.
Yeah, so it was hot while it was raining, so it dried quite quickly.
But Alpine obviously sat in the pit lane and didn't think about the track itself, because they just sat their 2 cars in the pit and watched them go 19th and 20th.
Yeah. And then also, Russell just got caught out as well. He just couldn't improve. So it was actually 2 of the top 8 drivers, which is what it is now, really, were out in Q1, which was quite odd.
And Russell, in his own gentle way, was a bit like, okay, so why didn't you fuel me up, for 2 or 3 laps? Because it's obvious with the track improving.
Yeah, they didn't fuel him for enough runs.
But then also, he admits himself he just actually didn't do the job either.
Yeah, I mean, he could have done it in 1 lap, but...
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this now, and all bar a few thousandths, he was basically 9/10 of a second off his teammate.
What was that? Yeah, he was basically a second off, almost.
Yeah. Which, when you consider how their qualifying has been going this season, it's a bit like, what the...
Yeah, I think he just got caught out. Gap. Well, it's conditions, isn't it? Drying track.
You say conditions, but all the way through, he was a good 10 places behind Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, I'm saying it's Hamilton, though, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Perez crashed.
He's been out
qualifying him massively all season.
Yeah. I just think when it's a bit of... Although he did put it on pole in Britain when it was... Was it? No, it wasn't drying in the qualifying in Britain. Just think Hamilton might be actually that good in the wet. Because he matched Verstappen. But yeah, he also didn't get fueled enough.
So you're right, with some of the big names out.
Yeah, we got Magnussen. Both Haas is up. Bottas and Sauber went up. Both Williams is as well, so that's another point for Sargent against Perez.
Yeah?
He might overtake him this season. He might, beat him in the head-to-head, Sargent.
It's ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah.
Both RBs got into Q3, which must feel really good for them.
Yeah, well, except Tsunoda binned it in Q3.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, in Q2, pretty standard, I think. It was both Hasses, both Williams and the Sauber.
You say pretty standard, but I remember watching it. It was a little bit terrifying. I'm looking at the times here. Because almost immediately Hamilton was down in 10th.
Yes, actually. He was
and
100th off.
100th. He stayed in there by 100th of a second.
I do remember seeing the times and them not getting out of the drop zone, and then seeing, I think, Albon pit, and I was like, oh, thank God he actually did get through.
And Hulkenberg was 116.317.
Yeah.
And Hamilton was 116.307.
But there was only 0.2 from Magnussen up to Hulkenberg as well. It is still, as always, ridiculously tight.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is. I'm looking at the final times as well. As Christian Horner says, they've got past that kind of steep learning curve where everybody's starting to understand the new regulations, and obviously Red Bull understood them better. So there was huge gaps in 22 and 23. But now everybody else is learning what Red Bull learned. And there aren't many gains left, especially for teams like Red Bull, to find.
Yeah. So the overall level has increased, but also the gap to the front. I think it seems like the whole race and the qualifying, McLaren was just the fastest car.
Yeah.
Because regardless of the shenanigans at the front, they had 10 seconds on Hamilton and Verstappen, before we even think about who was where. I got to sneeze 1 sec. Oh, God. Do I need to sneeze? No, I don't. Damn it, okay.
And, you look at the final qualifying, Lando Norris basically did a 1:15.2.
Yeah.
But then so did Piastri and Verstappen. And then behind them, the Ferraris and the one Mercedes were a good half a second back, actually.
Yeah, 1:15.6.
And then an 8, and then a 9.
And then a 1:16 for the rest of them.
Yeah.
Did Ricciardo... No, Ricciardo and Tsunoda were a 10th apart, a 1,000th apart. 100th? That's what it is, yeah.
No, 300th, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it said a 16.447 and a 16.477. It's a bit confusing to pars.
That's what I was going to say. Do you remember the beginning of the season when the new Red Bull came out?
Yeah.
And everybody was like, it looks really weird. It looks like they're trying to copy what Mercedes are doing, even though Mercedes are massively struggling.
Yes.
Apparently that was the point at which Newey decided to leave.
Right.
Because he had design ideas, obviously, for the 2024 Red Bull car. But he was overruled by, I think, head of aerodynamics at Red Bull, who wanted to try something different.
How is Newey not the head of aerodynamics at Red Bull?
I think he's higher up. I think he's director of performance engineering or something like that.
Yeah, probably.
But apparently there was a disagreement, and for once Newey didn't win.
And now look, they're you say they're backsliding, or everybody else is catching up to them now.
But that's always been the case in every F1 season. Every F1 season, it's almost more about how well the teams bring updates and how well those updates work. Yeah. Than it is about how fast a car you start with.
Yeah, definitely.
Was either 22 or 23 when Aston Martin started fighting for the lead basically at the beginning of the season and then dropped back to a solid midfield team by the end.
Yeah, I'm just looking through my... Yeah, so 2023, Alonso was he had those 5 podiums in 6 races.
Yeah.
Or 7 podiums in 8 races. And then after race 8, he got 2 more podiums the whole season.
Yeah, so it's about the kind of development cycle, and you know, the people around him were obviously developing their cars and doing better, and he just wasn't. Well, not he, but Aston Martin just weren't.
And it seems like Aston Martin have got worse now because they're really struggling.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they got two of the kind of free places. They were 7th and 8th.
Which for them is actually quite good, it seems.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yes, so a McLaren front row lockout.
Yes.
For the first time since Italy 21?
Yeah,
I don't know if that was a front row
I was going to say Monza 21.
That was certainly the last time they had a weekend that was as good as this, in some ways.
But I noticed a pattern, and you'll probably confirm this because your memory of what happens is better.
Yes.
But Lando Norris gets a pole.
Yeah.
And then he just doesn't do the start.
Mm.
And was it Austria where he was on pole, and there were like 3 or 4 cars abreast into the first corner, and Russell just went right round all of them and went, "Yep, I'll have the lead, thank you."
Yeah. It was that. Yeah. In fact, I found a statistic. He's lost all 5 pole positions on the first lap, and each time it was a different driver. So, in 2021 in Russia, he lost it to Sainz. He had 2 sprint races. He lost it to Verstappen and Hamilton. In Spain, he lost it to Russell, and now he lost it to Piastri.
Oh, it was Spain, was it? Yeah.
He's never led a lap 1 from pole, basically.
And that's, there's one common factor in all of those, unfortunately.
Well, yeah, it's a data thing, isn't it? He just starts are his particular weakness, it seems.
Yeah, to be fair, I've rewatched that start several times because it was a very grumpy race. I'm not going to really single out... Well, I will single out Max for what he said later on in the race, but everybody seemed to be a bit kind of tetchy, didn't they?
Yeah.
I mean...
Everybody was... Yeah, I think it was that it was very hot, maybe?
Yeah.
I don't really know why. It was weird to me that, Max was obviously having a bad race in terms of the car, wasn't behaving how he wanted it to. He got that. He had to give that position back to Lando. That I think that really upset him for some reason.
Yeah, and that I've rewatched that on like the replays and everything. And the 3 of them, it went from the outside of the corner. It was Max. Then it was Lando, and it was Oscar doing the sensible thing and sending it up the inside.
Hmm.
And then Max went off because he brought too much speed in, basically.
Yeah.
And then kind of Lewis and I think Charles Leclerc were arguing. And he just kind of slotted in ahead of Lando Norris. Or was it Lewis and Lando, I think, were fighting, and Lando got ahead of Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah.
But Hamilton... I think almost because of that fight, Lando lost a bit of ground and Max came out in front.
Well, Max just basically skipped the corner, didn't he?
Well, he took a much wider corner, yeah.
I'm just rewatching it on my phone again. See, Lando's very aggressive covering Piastri.
Yeah.
And then he goes to Verstappen. They're 3 abreast at the corner. Norris can't do anything. Verstappen goes out very wide. Then, Norris is kind of defending from Hamilton, and Verstappen he doesn't rejoin as sharply. He basically makes it a much longer corner so he can get ahead of Norris, which is, of course, leaving the track and gaining an advantage because he wasn't ahead of the apex, so he cheated, basically.
Yeah, he was kind of 3 abreast at the apex, but carrying more speed in.
Yeah, and then he got ahead of Norris, who was defending from Hamilton. Because I think Hamilton was sniffing a podium at that point. Because of course, Norris was sort of avoiding Piastri. And Piastri got the ideal line and shot off into the lead. Whereas Norris and Verstappen were like doing damage control, basically.
Yeah. And I mean, it was an odd situation anyway. Because all they really said to Max was, it's gone to the stewards for investigation.
Hmm.
They didn't actually say, oh, you're going to pick up a stop-go penalty or anything. And at that point, he decided the most sensible thing. Well, he was ordered basically to give it back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And one thing you said before we started this was the Ferraris had a kind of unforgettable race. They swapped places.
Yeah.
Sainz qualified in 4th and Leclerc in 6th. and they swapped because Sainz, I think, got swamped at the start.
Yeah, he had a bad start, did Sainz, he said.
And sometimes, when you've got, the top 6 cars piling into the first corner, somebody's got to get squeezed out, and in this case it was Sainz.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they kind of just, for once they did everything right, really. Good strategy calls, undercutting when they needed to.
Yeah, I mean...
That's probably the best they could have hoped for, to be honest.
There were definitely times when Hamilton and Verstappen were dueling that Leclerc suddenly just came into the same camera shot because he was not, going offline and doing weird stuff. And he never quite, made a dive on Verstappen or anything, but he suddenly got DRS on him a few times. And it was like, actually, he's still in this race. He's not really in that no man's land that Sainz was in Britain.
No, there was a phase. I can't remember what phase it was. But there was a phase where Verstappen, I think it was the middle phase after the first set of pit stops, where Verstappen was on fresher tyres and was closing up on Hamilton, who wouldn't let him past.
Yeah.
And in the background, you're right, Sainz was taking... I'm going to say, not Sainz, Charles Leclerc was taking, I'm going to say, good 1/10 of a second out of them every lap. He started off 5 or 6 seconds from the back of Verstappen, and as you pointed out, it wasn't long. It might even have been 7 seconds. And suddenly he was in DRS range, so...
Yeah.
You're right, that's much better from Ferrari. They're properly back in the fight.
Well...
I'm looking down
yeah, kind of the fight has sort of fallen back to them, but also McLaren are running away. It's just that McLaren's own worst enemy is themselves now.
Yeah. Actually, for once, ignoring qualifying, Perez did the best that could be expected.
Yeah. I'll say that was actually
brought it up
probably Perez's best race of the season, I'd say, apart from some of his early podiums, maybe.
Yeah, I wouldn't say of the season, but I'd say of the recent slump.
Since,
given how
those
badly he qualified.
Let's say since Monaco, because that's when he had a DNF.
Yeah.
And since then, he's never finished higher than 7th.
Yeah.
So, but I think...
Given that we've got the classic Ferrari, Mercedes, Red Bull, and McLaren clumped all together at the top.
Yeah.
It was about the best that he could have hoped for, really.
It did, I think I said that in the olden days, like 14 to about 20, if one of the top 3 drivers was out of position, they would kind of scythe through the field and they'd be back up in the top 10 pretty soon.
Yeah.
That's actually what both Perez and Russell did this race.
But you see, I think crucially as well, given how closely Hamilton and Verstappen were fighting, without any drama, Perez just kept Russell behind him.
Yeah.
Given that those cars were kind of on a par now, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I don't think you'd find many people down like the proverbial pub or whatever who'd go, oh yeah, Perez is a better driver than Russell.
No, but the Hungaroring is quite tough to overtake on.
Yeah.
And there was a time Perez was called like the Mexican Minister of Defense.
Yeah.
Mostly when he got in Abu Dhabi 2021, he held Hamilton behind him for a long time.
Yeah.
To get the championship for Verstappen.
But, yeah, I mean, there could have been an undercut. When he needed to go fast to make the strategy work, he did.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, considering all the grief that Perez has been getting and the fact that he's not meeting his performance clauses, if I was his manager, I'd be going, you can build on this. It's not great because of Q1, but you can build on this. This is a positive. You can walk away from that saying Saturday wasn't good, but Sunday was a really good race.
I have a theory as well.
Yeah.
Basically, this race, Verstappen hated the balance of the car. He was really kind of annoyed with how the car felt, like it wouldn't turn in. It was understeering, I think Brundle said, which he hates.
I heard both. He said it's all both under and oversteering, depending on where he puts it in.
Yeah. But the thing is, since this is the first race Verstappen's been unhappy with the balance, It's also the first race in a while that Perez has actually done a good job.
Oh, you think they're not matched as teammates? They both want different things out of a car.
Yeah, so I think maybe the Red Bulls got, inverted commas, worse. In reality, it's just suiting Perez's driving style more than Verstappen's at the moment. Or maybe, the setup that they had at Hungary or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, actually, they brought upgrades, didn't they? Everybody brought upgrades. They have a new weird side pod design.
Yeah, and so they got rid of the sausages or the cucumbers, yeah.
Yeah, so maybe this will be, maybe Perez will, in fact, with proper qualifying, he could come back.
Yeah. Of all the drivers on the grid,
yeah.
I don't know if you've heard this, guess who actually said he was outraged at the way his team handled strategy?
I think I do know this one. It was Ricciardo.
Yeah, the most grumpy... Wait a minute, Ricciardo?
Well, I don't know. He saw Monaco 2016. He wasn't super happy then, was he?
No.
But yeah, I did see that, yeah.
Of all the drivers to be outraged, he's just normally the happiest, most laid back. I mean, almost stereotypical kind of laid back Australian.
Well, again, yeah, look at Piastri after his win.
Yeah.
But yeah. I mean, yeah, so I don't know what they did with Ricciardo. I think they two-stopped him, but they one-stopped Tsunoda and effectively cost Ricciardo loads of time to Tsunoda, even though they qualified next to each other. So Tsunoda ended up 9th, and Ricciardo was 12th. Yeah,
because they started Ricciardo on softs. And then that meant they had to pit him on something ridiculous like lap 6.
Mm-hmm.
And the timing of that pit stop meant he came out on the back of a DRS train.
Oh.
So any advantage he got from the pit stop and the fresh tyres would be well, I'm at the back of a DRS train, so these lovely fresh tyres that are meant to help me regain some places are now just being wasted.
Yeah.
Or if they pitted him and he came back out into fresh air, he could bring the tyres up nicely and then use them to build an undercut.
Mm-hmm.
But there was nothing he could do about that.
Yeah, so he effectively... Yeah, they released Ricciardo into traffic, so he couldn't do the undercut, basically.
Yeah, and yeah, he was just kind of stuck, which it must have been annoying because he qualified in the top 10.
Yeah, and then his team effectively screwed him out of points.
And to be honest, the subtext there is people are waiting for Perez to get the boot over the summer break. So anybody in the Red Bull ecosystem, especially Tsunoda and Ricciardo, but also Sainz's name has been bandied around a bit.
Yeah.
Or Albon, or
anybody really
who knows the Red Bull system.
I think
have been.
Yeah, I think Ricciardo's still probably in the best position.
Yeah.
But
he was probably looking for a chance to say, look, this is what I can do. And he wasn't given it, so that's probably why he was upset.
Yeah. Because he knows that his performance could, directly affect his future job prospects, basically.
Yeah. So, which of the big controversies...
Should we start further down with the Red Bull?
Okay.
Maximum Emilian Verstappen's.
Yeah. I mean, he just... the one thing that annoyed me was the number of times the commentators pointed out that he'd stayed up till 3 a.m. sim racing.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought once or twice mention it, but it seemed to be every 20 minutes. Although actually it was every 20 minutes we got another grumpy message from him.
Yeah, but I think as well, it was just kind of a weird, almost kind of like an old boomerish sort of thing, if you hadn't stayed up late playing video games, you'd have been winning the race.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm sure he's done it before and then won the race and was perfectly happy afterwards.
Yeah, I've seen it happen before as well.
And I mean, it's a 2-3 p.m. race? There's no reason why he couldn't go to sleep at 3 a.m. and then wake up at 10 a.m., he doesn't need to actually be up at 9 a.m., does he? He can just get to the track whenever before the race starts.
Yeah, I mean, it was Nico Rosberg as well, who was like you say, it's very kind of old-fashioned, almost puritanical, because Nico Rosberg was saying, oh yeah, look at Lando Norris, he was in bed by 11:05, although quite how Rosberg knows this, I don't know. And, he gets up at 8 and he's already got his breakfast set out, so he's eating right and he's, dedicating himself more seriously to it. And you're a bit like...
Yeah, because
you're making an awful lot of assumptions there about how it's...
I'm sure drivers like Raikkonen and James Hunt were doing that sort of stuff and winning championships, weren't they?
And Alonso.
Yeah, none of them ever stayed up late their whole lives, I'm sure. Or did any sort of
if the film was to be believed, I'm not entirely sure Hunt was even sober some of the time.
I'm sure there's a scene in like F2 where he was like, when he was driving F2, he would have like a glass of whiskey to calm his nerves before he went racing.
Yeah.
But
so it's a bit, but he was really tetchy. I don't think, he actually said afterwards, we couldn't have won that race because the McLarens were faster.
Yeah.
But he definitely had his eye on P3. Well, he qualified grid 3.
Yeah.
So, he expected to at least finish there to be faster than...
Yeah.
And he just seemed to be, like you say, he didn't like the balance of the car. He didn't like the strategy.
He got massively undercut by Hamilton.
Yeah.
Who was just kind of had a bit of again, almost a quiet race, but just was faster than Verstappen.
That's just kind of pure skill, though, isn't it? It's like, it doesn't look flashy.
Yeah. Stay out of trouble. Well, apart from that one bit.
Lap 63.
Yeah, that's George Russell's number.
Yeah, actually, I watched that back on the replays this morning, and it was very similar to the first corner incident. On the first corner, Max went up the outside with carried too much speed, and went off the track. And on that lap 63 collision, he went up the inside. He had his DRS open because they were overtaking Alexander Albon.
Yes.
And he just carried too much speed into the corner, locked it up. I actually did find, I will find it now, the actual wording of the steward's decision.
Yes.
And they say, the driver of car 44 stated this was a racing incident, while the driver of car 1 argued that it was a case of changing direction under braking. Oh, there is a bit.
Yeah.
Here we go. The stewards do not consider this to be a typical case of changing direction under braking, although it is our determination that the driver of car 44 could have done more to avoid the collision.
Yeah.
Which is Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah.
But they had access to the telemetry. So they said that Max Verstappen carried more speed into that corner because he was using DRS to get past Albon than he had done on any previous lap. And they also said basically Lewis Hamilton drove it like a normal corner. He saw Verstappen coming. He left him a car's width on the inside and just turned into the corner like he would normally.
Yeah.
Which is where they said he could have done more to avoid the collision. But to be honest, he was ahead when they went into the corner. So he was like, one car's width on the inside, I'm turning in, I'm doing my thing. Let Max do what he wants.
Yeah. But I think Max was out of control. That's the crucial thing. Is that he locked up. And it says that he didn't have he braked at the normal point, but he was missing the normal cornering line for a typical overtaking manoeuvre.
Yeah.
Which is basically that he locked up and was going straight on, so he wasn't sort of properly he wasn't trying to make the corner, which we've definitely seen him do before.
I'm trying to look for, I can't remember the exact words.
Yeah.
But they interviewed Hamilton about it afterwards and he was like, yeah, that's just racing. I don't have any ill will about it, but I know that I think it was aggressive or something like that. He says, I know Red Bull will come across all aggressive, but it doesn't bother me because it's just hard, fair racing. I left him space. He didn't use it.
Yeah.
He said something weird about Red Bull.
He said, I think he said, there's no animosity from my side, but I know there always will be, or something like that.
Yeah, that was it. I think animosity.
And then he did like a mic drop and laughed about it. So I think he kind of doesn't really care much.
And oh yeah, I mean, this is the kind of classic Max Verstappen. Does that really make sense? So at one point, I naturally lock up because he keeps turning on to the right.
So because Hamilton's trying to make the corner, which is kind of his right as a racing driver, Verstappen locks up? How can he blame Hamilton for what he did in his own cockpit with his feet on the brakes?
Well, because Max Verstappen never blames Max Verstappen. Not if there's somebody else involved.
He can blame the team, the stewards, the other drivers. I don't actually think I've ever heard Verstappen say, sorry, that was my fault, as basically every other driver on the grid has at least once.
You know, I was thinking about this. In the era that we've had access to the radio messages, the world champions that I've watched who have been world champions and have then come onto a car that's not performing at the level they used to are probably Seb Vettel, Kimi Raikkonen, Fernando Alonso, and Lewis Hamilton. I don't think I've missed anybody.
Well, Button? But no, Button kind of went to McLaren and he was pretty good, actually.
Yeah, and I don't really remember hearing much of his onboard radio. But with those four, Alonso absolutely slated the car and the engine supplier to the extent where it caused a problem, I think, at McLaren.
Yeah.
Where he said things in a race like, oh, I feel like I'm in an F2 car in an F1 race.
I think he said GP2 engine specifically.
Yeah.
Which is like, way to build a good relationship with your engine suppliers.
From my memory, I think over the last couple of years, I think Lewis has been quite downbeat. And he's complained about his tyres and he's been like, I'm sorry guys, I can't do more with this car.
Yeah, that's what I've heard from him, basically.
But he hasn't actually got into an out-and-out fight with Bono, for example.
No, he's mostly said, we've got work to do. The car isn't fast. We don't know why. We're going to work together to get it faster, basically.
I think Vettel and Raikkonen, I think Raikkonen was just like, doesn't really talk much.
Yeah.
Shut up and let me drive, I think is the most memorable thing he said.
Yeah, he does get a bit antsy in the cockpit sometimes, but...
And I can't remember what Vettel's been like either.
Well, Vettel left... He left Red Bull the year after his last championship to go to Ferrari because the Red Bull... Well, first he got beaten by Ricciardo and I don't think he liked it.
Yeah.
He didn't... When he was at Ferrari, he didn't seem too kind of angry at them.
No.
I don't remember.
Apparently, on this subject, the reason why Alonso left in 2018 was because he just had 4 or 5 years of getting every race basically won by a Mercedes.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't need to work. I don't need to be in Formula One. I'm not enjoying turning up to work every Thursday. So he went off and did other stuff because why not? He wasn't happy there.
Yeah.
And that's why he came back when the balance started to shift and he could see that things were going to be different.
Just that he didn't like Mercedes?
I didn't like one team being utterly dominant. And there was, in his mind, there was no chance he could get into a team that could race for the win. So
yeah, because it was Ferrari, which didn't like him because he had already raced there. There was Red Bull, who were kind of his main rivals in 2010 to 13.
Yeah.
And they were locked in at that point with like Verstappen and Ricciardo.
Yeah.
And they were committed to their junior program. So yeah, there was nowhere to go. I remember talking about it at the time. And just being like, there's no options for Alonso. So
yeah, that whole kind of where like Max Verstappen was basically... I mean, I've actually seen unedited, uncensored radio messages, and he's basically swearing about the strategy they're on and complaining that he's getting undercut and complaining the car is not very good, but in really colourful language.
Yeah.
And I think it was after the crash on lap 63, which is what we were talking about.
Oh, yeah. Once upon a time.
Yep. That I've never heard a race engineer talk to a driver the way Giampiero Lambiase is Max Verstappen's race engineer, known as GP.
Yeah.
GP spoke to Max and said, "We're not going to sort this out over the radio. It's just childish, really childish."
Yeah. We're not going to get into a fight with the other teams on the radio. It's just childish on the radio.
Yeah.
I mean, they were... And I think... I don't remember what GP said about it, but Verstappen basically said something like, "Oh, whatever then, doesn't matter." I think he actually just said whatever in one of his... What's it called? Radio messages.
Yeah, and it was... Yeah, it was kind of... I mean, yeah, I've never heard a... They kind of... Red Bull tried to row it back afterwards and say, "Oh yeah, he meant the other teams were childish and trying to sort it out over the radio."
Yeah, his tone of voice didn't...
No, I think he actually said it's childish Max, which kind of...
Yeah. He sounded like a parent talking to his kid almost. Or like they've been compared to an old married couple before.
Well, I think any driver... I've seen an article about driver-race engineer relationships, and they say it is basically as close as a marriage.
Yeah.
You know, your race engineer, you have very little sight in the car. Your race engineer holds your life in their hands.
Yeah.
Because, you know, if there's like a crashed car on track round a blind corner and you're going around that corner at 150 miles an hour and it's, you know, it's just happened, you need somebody to say, yeah, back off, accident, or,
yeah,
you know, almost before the yellow flags come out.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's GP and Max are like an old married couple. I think it's more that I mean, there's actually been discussion over whether Lewis Hamilton can tempt Bono to come to Italy with him, and the chances are probably not.
Yeah.
But it is actually that important a relationship that it's being talked about as a consideration when a driver switches teams.
Yeah.
So again, in that terms, it was quite weird to hear them arguing.
Yeah.
And for whatever Red Bull say, we're closing ranks and we'll discuss it behind closed doors, I don't think either Christian Horner or their sponsors will be very happy.
No, yeah. And it is kind of I think Red Bull as a team is kind of just crumbling at this point, it feels like.
It's probably a symptom. The one last thing I want to say about that accident before we move on.
Yeah.
I think, again, Max Verstappen was very lucky to finish the race in fifth. If you look at it, he went a long way up in the air and came down on the curb really hard.
Yeah.
I think another driver would have popped a tyre or would have smashed their floor or their rear diffuser to pieces or...
Yeah, I mean, but it's almost just pure luck at that point, isn't it? Like, how does he get away with it almost?
Well, it's the same as the accident with Lando Norris where, you know, he came in fifth and Lando DNF'd.
Yeah.
I also think that was part of the steward's decision. I think the fact that he lost 2 race places out of it and got off the podium was kind of deemed to be a fair punishment in a way.
Yeah, I don't know if
if
penalty would have dropped him back any further.
But I think if he like burst the front tyre on the Mercedes or clipped the wing and ripped the front nose cone off, I think he would have probably got a 5 or 10 second causing a collision penalty.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, it is. That's kind of how he was racing very aggressively against Norris as well. When he first let him past, he was kind of taking very sort of odd lines into the corner because you could see that he was just angry.
Yeah, it was a very odd race altogether. Anyway, the other big talking point was And looking at the result afterwards, it kind of seems a weird thing to say, because if people don't understand how F1 works, I'll really briefly explain it. The driver who's ahead on the road, in this case Oscar Piastri, was leading Lando Norris before the second set of pit stops.
Yeah.
Traditionally, and almost as a rule set in stone, although it's not in the FIA rules, they get the first choice of when to come in for pit stops. And at the Hungaroring, the undercut, in other words, the driver who stops first can then do faster laps on fresher tyres. And in a lot of cases in this race, overtake the driver who's behind them or in front of them without actually having to overtake them on the road is really powerful. But McLaren were really afraid that Lewis Hamilton would get close to Lando Norris. So they chose to pit him first, even though he was behind Piastri. And rather predictably, he then got the undercut on his teammate and got into the lead.
Yeah.
And I say it's weird because you look at the race result, Lewis Hamilton was nearly 15 seconds behind at the end.
Yeah.
So it's almost like they covered off a threat that wasn't there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much of that was down to the accident or...
Well, Hamilton was definitely more worried about Verstappen than he was about catching the McLarens. They had the pace on him.
But it then created this weird position where Lando Norris was in the lead of the race. Oscar Piastri came out 2 or 3 seconds behind him and then dropped back to 6 or 7 seconds.
I think he did have an off, actually. He went off onto the gravel and got his tyres dirty. Yeah. I think he did that at the first or the second stint. But he also made a mistake at the end again.
Yeah. And then you had this... I mean, it was a really awkward watch because virtually every lap, various different members of the McLaren team would come on the radio to Lando Norris. And they tried directly ordering him to give the place back. They tried guilt-tripping him. They tried explaining to him. And it was only up until, I think, 2 laps from the end that he finally went, oh, for God's sake, I'll give the place back.
Yeah. I think Norris had intended to give it back on the last corner of the last lap, basically, to kind of make a point and say, I should have won the race. But then his engineer said, if there's a safety car, you can't actually do that. And so at that point, he did relent and give it back, I think. So I do think he kind of always intended to do it, because if it was the safety car argument that got him to come round, that kind of makes the most sense in a way.
And again, coming back to our earlier discussion about race engineers, one thing, Lando's, I can't remember his name, but Lando's race engineer.
Will Joseph, I think, is his race engineer.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah. Actually
came on the radio and said, Lando, I tried to protect you.
Yeah, that was weird.
Well, no, that means that he's being a proper... His entire focus is getting Lando Norris to win. So his race engineer was going to Andre Stella and whoever else was involved and saying, let the guy win.
Yeah.
So however it shook out, whatever happened, he didn't want that relationship with Lando Norris to suffer. He didn't want him to think he's not on his side.
Yeah.
I'm sure that's what he meant.
It's just, very, very weird.
Actually, you know what I realised would have been a far more sensible approach from Lando Norris?
Yeah.
The minute they said it, like 10, 15 laps from the end, he should have given the place back immediately.
Yeah.
Because if he genuinely was faster on the track, what can he then do?
Overtake him on pace.
Yeah.
But then, I think, thing is, in the second stint, they said you can race the other papaya until the mid-40s in terms of laps. Yeah. And then they did the second round of pit stops. And then they wanted them to swap. So I think their plan was always to get whoever was ahead in the mid-40s was going to win the race, I think. Because they said, remember the Sunday morning briefings? I think that's when they said, here's the plan.
Yeah, but I think there's a whole world of difference between winning a race by refusing to give a lucky pit stop back and winning the race by ignoring team orders and fighting till the last line. Yeah. Doing the second way just makes you sound like a hard kind of Schumacher, Verstappen, never give up level of racer.
Yeah. But also I think what I would say is if he then tried to go after him afterwards in the last 10 laps, they probably would have just come on and said, hold position.
Yeah, and in which case he would have said, I'm clearly faster, why can't I do this?
And it would have been a bit more. Although that being said, every time Piastri was ahead of Norris, he was faster.
Yeah.
So I think what happened is Piastri, and to be fair to him, tyre management has been his weakness all season. Like in Imola, I think he dropped back at the end because his tyres were knackered. But this race, he actually did kind of a tyre-saving masterclass because he kept that gap to Norris pretty consistent. And then in that final stint, I think they told both drivers, manage your tyres, and they told Oscar, we'll deal with it, don't worry about it. So Oscar wasn't pushing to catch up to him because they weren't telling him to. But then Norris said, they told Norris to slow down and he didn't. And Norris said, well, tell him to catch up.
Yeah, it was very...
It was just...
I mean,
yeah.
My opinion is, if I was a team boss, I would apologise to Piastri and tell them to hold station for the simple reason Lando Norris is second in the championship.
Yeah.
He's a million miles behind Max Verstappen. 7 points is a lot.
Yes. Well,
I totally get that it's his maiden win and everything, but if Norris can catch Verstappen, the way the numbers work out, 7 points could be the difference.
yeah, definitely. If Norris loses the championship by less than 7 points, I dread to think what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's nasty. It's,
Yeah, again, this is...
I can see that Piastri might storm off and leave the team next season, etc. But it's a tough sport.
That's kind of the thing. It's like McLaren didn't know which angle they were going for. Because why would you undercut Piastri with Norris unless you wanted Norris to win? They didn't need to cover Hamilton that much. If they had just undercut, and then they just said to Oscar, hold position, we're sorry, it kind of would have been a bit more... It would have been more clear cut. I mean, you could all go, boo, McLaren, you're bad, you're the bad guys. But it's kind of almost better than just them being kind of confused and incompetent looking.
But you see, I mean, this is what I've been saying the whole year we've been doing this podcast. Really quick.
Yeah.
Who's the lead driver at McLaren?
Norris?
Yes. Who's the lead driver at Mercedes?
Hamilton now, I think.
Yeah. Who's the lead driver at Ferrari?
I have no idea. They're so close.
But then, what happens if I say, who's the lead driver at Red Bull?
There's 2 drivers at Red Bull.
Exactly. And that's why Red Bull win everything, because they know who their lead driver is.
Yes.
If that was Sergio Perez
it wouldn't have
in
even,
the lead...
They would have even needed to ask him.
No.
They'd have just got on the radio, gone, Sergio, and he'd have gone, yeah, all right then, off you go.
Yeah. And, there was that time when they asked Max to give up like a 5th place to help Sergio win second in the championship, and Max was like, I don't do that.
Yeah.
You do not ask me.
Unequivocal.
It wasn't even like, don't do that. It was like, you don't even ask me that.
Yeah, which is also probably not great for Perez's, mental side of it.
Well, no, I mean, that's probably part of the reason why Max Verstappen eats teammates.
Yeah, but also that's kind of shooting him in the foot a little bit now, because McLaren are only 51 points behind in the championship.
I was actually looking at that. Last year...
Calculate how
I actually did the maths on this. Last year,
yeah,
Max Verstappen won the Constructors' Championship on his own.
Yes.
I mean, okay, it was a 1-2, the first 1-2 they've ever had. Sergio Perez came second. I'm not here to bash him unnecessarily. Sergio Perez delivered their first ever 1-2 in a Drivers' Championship. That was brilliant.
Yeah.
But this year, Max Verstappen is only 4th in the Constructors' Championship. They need the points from Sergio Perez.
Yeah, McLaren outscored Red Bull by 27 points that race. And both Red Bulls scored as well.
Yeah, it wasn't like a DNF or anything.
If they do that twice more, McLaren lead the Constructors. They're actually really close. And not to mention Ferrari is still only 16 points behind McLaren.
Yeah, it is looking really quite... I think that's going to probably be what drives the decision on Perez.
Yeah, as if they lose the constructors. Surely they can't keep him on for next year at least.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like the top 4 well, 2, 3, 4, they're all in the kind of 150, 160 bracket, which compared to Perez would give them another 30 odd points, which at the moment would make it a lot more comfortable.
I mean, there's pretty close. Leclerc, Sainz, Piastri, Hamilton are all and Perez down to Russell's fairly close.
Yeah.
And now
there's a bit of a gap between Piastri and Hamilton still, a good race win.
Yeah, but, Piastri overtook him, which is interesting.
I think the next race and after the summer break are going to be really interesting for 2 reasons. Yeah. Either we're going to start to get other non-Max Verstappen drivers who've won 2 or more races, because just seriously, everybody who could win a race has won a race.
Yeah, I'm waiting for, Hulkenberg to win next.
Or Max Verstappen is going to start winning again and pulling away. One of those 2.
Yeah.
But the other reason it's going to be interesting is Red Bull are running out of parts. We keep saying this, but...
Yes. Sorry.
And also, it doesn't actually help that Perez keeps crashing the car, because that costs them a fortune. And they're under a cost cap. And they can't keep making new parts. And it's probably, looking at the crashes he's had, damaging gearboxes and stuff like that. So it's...
Yeah, it's... Yeah. It depends how the next... Well, Belgium is traditional Verstappen hunting ground. After that,
Hamilton also loves it.
After that, it's the Netherlands. And so it's kind of those 2 races. If Verstappen gets embarrassed there, that could kind of be... That'll be when I start thinking we've actually got a championship fight on our hands.
Yeah.
I remember last episode, you specifically said you want to see Norris outscore Verstappen and get the fight going.
Yeah.
If nothing else, that did happen.
No, I mean, that was a really big takeaway, because even when apart from when he won in Miami, Verstappen's had a knack of always coming out ahead of Norris, no matter who's been at the front.
Even just one
Russell
place,
or Hamilton or whoever on the podium, he's already... Normally he's managed to outscore him, but this time, it's actually turned the tables.
This is also statistics time. The first non-Verstappen victor in 3 races. So basically, it's the first time that Verstappen's failed to win 3 races in a row since 2021.
Ah.
When he lost Brazil, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia in a row. But that time he came second in all of those, and he's only come second once at Britain. He came 5th, then 2nd, then 5th. It's actually pretty poor form for Verstappen.
Or for Red Bull, yeah. Maybe that's why he's being so tetchy. Ah.
Yes.
How are we doing for time, by the way?
Oh, God, we're up to 53 minutes already.
Did you hear about the cool-down room as well?
What happened in the cool-down room?
Well, Hamilton, being the nice guy that he is...
Yeah.
Comes across to Norris, who's still probably fuming about not winning.
Yeah.
And says, "Man, you guys were fast out there." Kind of typical nice guy.
He had a fast car, I think he said.
Lando Norris said, "Oh yeah, but you were fast 7 years ago, weren't you?"
Yeah.
And Hamilton was like, "What the hell? Were you even racing 7 years ago?" He said, "That's a long time ago. Were you even racing then?"
But he wasn't, no, because it was 2019.
And then, they said something else, and Hamilton just gave him a stare and said, "I was trying to compliment you, man."
Yeah.
So, like I say, the whole weekend seemed a bit...
Well, I think Norris was in a bad mood still.
Yeah.
But also I think Norris does struggle with kind of almost like an inferiority complex, kind of. Because every time he comes second, even... Instead of going good points for the team, 5 years ago we weren't even dreaming of this sort of form. Every time he comes second or doesn't win a race since Miami, he's always kind of like, oh, I just didn't win, and that's really disappointing, and, I should be doing the best, and I'm not. It's like, you could just be happy for once. And even, now with this as well, I think he's a bit sort of downbeat all the time.
I kind of see what you mean, but, all the commentators have said there's so many races since Miami where he had the chance to win it.
Yeah.
It's not like in this race, realistically, barring accidents and engine blow-ups, there's no way Hamilton or Verstappen were in the running for the win.
No.
So they're not downbeat because, actually, another statistic for you.
Yeah.
Hamilton has now won 200 podiums.
Yes.
That was his 200th time on a podium.
Which is ludicrous.
And actually, over half of them have been wins. Anyway.
But it's funny because they said he's the first driver to hit 200 podiums. And I was thinking, but he was also the first to hit 199 and 198 and 197.
Yes.
The way they phrased that was a bit like, well, yeah, true, but still.
So
he's only done 300 races as well. That's like 2/3 of all the races he's competed in. He was on the podium.
Yeah.
That's actually kind of unthinkable almost.
But yeah, it was. I think I can kind of see why Norris is so
dejected.
Because, it's not like he's a mid-range car that doesn't have a chance. I think he can see that if he had better strategy or better starts, he could.
Or kind of better racecraft as well, I think.
Yeah.
You think difference between him and Verstappen and Hamilton is just experience, I think, at this point.
Yeah, and it must be. Yeah, I'm looking back over the last few races. Spain, he was 2.2 off the lead with the fastest lap.
Yeah.
Canada, he was less than 4 seconds off the lead. So those are races where he can legitimately think,
I could have won, yeah.
Yeah. Emilia Romagna, he was 0.725, 3/4 of a second.
Yeah.
So I can kind of, yes, you're right, he's not like a bullish racing driver who's like, oh my god, I'm amazing.
Well, he kind of is in a way, because he's saying I should be winning every race.
But I can kind of see,
yeah,
he's always been within 10 seconds of Max Verstappen easily, and sometimes way closer. So I can really see why he's like, if he can find that last 5 or 10% of performance, mostly at the start,
yeah,
he could have won 4 or 5 races this season.
And it must be a bit galling to think that this race, McLaren were faster than Red Bull. It's the first time he's actually outscored Verstappen since Miami, but he still didn't win the race because Piastri beat him.
Off the line.
And so now maybe he's thinking, I can deal with Verstappen in terms of pace, but am I even the lead driver at my own team since we both got 1 race each? For our first wins this season, but Piastri's only in his 2nd season and Norris is in his 5th or something.
Yeah, and he didn't convert a pole into a win, which must be, he had the fastest car, he got on pole. Again, we're kind of beating up on him for him now, but that's probably where his thought process is going. Fastest car, put it on pole. What more do I need to do?
Well, he's got to, again, it's kind of that methodical approach of where's my weaknesses? Oh, it's the starts. Like what Piastri did with tyre management. And that kind of won him the race, I think, because he actually was doing a good job with tyre management when that was one of his weaknesses.
It's that kind of constant development, isn't it? Anyway, we have been rabbiting on a lot. I know it's an exciting race. I think we've covered everything that happened.
Oh, God, I'm trying to think what else even happened. Oh, right at the end, Aston Martin told Stroll to let Alonso by. Bearing in mind, Stroll was in 10th, Alonso was in 11th.
Yeah.
About a 5-second gap. And Stroll just completely blanked them and did nothing.
Oh, wow.
So he didn't even respond on the radio saying no, he just didn't respond and didn't slow down at all. And then afterwards he said, yeah, but I would have just tried to overtake him again anyway, so what's the point? Which is just but also I think it's what are they going to do, fire me? Because his dad owns the whole team.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the only other thing.
How far was Ricardo behind the pair of them? Because I've just got them as +1 lap.
Yeah, I've just got +1 lap. I don't know. I
I'm
think he was
wondering if
quite a
also-
way off.
Oh, okay. Because that was the other thing, I think. It
Yeah.
was quite weird to see Norris give up a 6-7 second lead. It kind of took a bit of choreography, didn't it?
Well, that was, I think, his issue, but then he made it worse by just going faster.
Yeah.
I don't really understand what his thought process was.
No.
It
It
was,
was kind of...
in the end, it was just a race where almost everybody was sort of unhappy in like the top 10, except,
I think Piastri was happy.
well, kind of, but he sounded a bit sort of, I think his first race win was a bit kind of tainted almost by like the sort of controversy, and he maybe
also
feels like
because
he was handed it a bit, so...
Yeah, he probably doesn't feel like he won it on merit in a weird way. I think
Even
Hamilton...
though I think he did deserve to win, it was a very strange situation.
Okay, Lewis Hamilton. I think he was happy in the top 10.
Yeah, he was sort of, he was joking around and stuff. He was just like, yeah, started fifth, podium.
Finished third.
Yeah,
Clicked up number 200 on the podiums as a bit of a treat.
sort of an
Another
upswing.
trophy.
Following.
Another trophy in the cabinet. Probably got a room actually, hasn't he?
He's probably got a house. Yeah. Ferraris
Yeah,
again.
you're
Just
right.
a sort of, Tsunoda's probably quite happy.
The Ferraris were probably quite happy because nothing went wrong.
Yeah, nothing. They somehow didn't ruin the strategy, although they did swap their drivers. Although I think
that happened on the
Sainz said it was just a bad start from him. Perez was
Yeah.
probably quite pleased.
Well, apart from his qualifying, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's
Anyway,
Belgium next week.
yeah, we're kind of reaching our time limit, I think.
But then it's the summer break, so I think we've got a bit of leeway with the time because we've got like 3 weeks without any episodes.
Yeah,
We can kind of use up this month's allowance on this.
yeah.
Let's just hope Belgium's really boring.
It's not likely to be. It's Belgium.
No. Yeah.
Anyway,
I
right.
think that's
Well,
it.
thank you very much for listening. There was an awful lot happened, so it's been a slightly longer podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I'm Graham Miller. If you like nice mystery novels, look up Graham H. Miller on Amazon, all usual outlets. If you're if you're listening to this on YouTube, you already know about Official Tibby, which is Toby's YouTube channel. Just remains for me to say goodbye.
Mm-hmm. Bye.